It's my pleasure to welcome everybody to the Research Symposium and 20th Anniversary Celebration of the Meyerhoff Scholars Program. I'm Mike Summers. I'm a professor of chemistry and biochemistry at UMBC, and I'm an investigator with the Howard Hughes Medical Institute. You know it's going to be a good day when you've lost your voice by noon, so it gives me great pleasure to kick off this two-day event where Meyerhoff alumni, current undergraduate and graduate students, family members, mentors, and supporters have gathered to celebrate how far we've come in the past 20 years and to recommit ourselves to the all-important work of the program. Its success and the result of the efforts made by many of the groups and individuals attending this weekend's event. We have a lot of people coming. We have over 600 people that will be here by this evening for the event downtown. And because we have such a large group that are coming in and will be here, we had to move the event to the Sheraton downtown. Today's Meyerhoff family includes more than 200 alumni who have already completed graduate and professional degrees. 66 alumni have earned Ph.D. or MD Ph.D. degrees. More than 50 have earned MDs, and nearly 100 have earned master's or professional degrees in engineering and other STEM-related fields. An additional 250 alumni are currently enrolled in graduate and professional schools around the country, and 234 scholars are currently enrolled at UMBC. In addition, the Meyerhoff Graduate Fellows Program at UMBC has graduated 18 PhDs in the past 7 years, with 42 additional doctoral students currently enrolled. I encourage you to participate in as much of the weekend's programming as you can. There are 3 panel discussions scheduled, including the first, which is about to begin. Our alumni and students will be making oral presentations on their current research tomorrow morning, as well as at poster sessions tomorrow afternoon. I also encourage you to stop by the video booth during the weekend. I think this is a great opportunity for everyone to share their thoughts and memories about the program and to provide a more personal contribution to our reunion. Perhaps most important, I hope that you will use this time to make new professional connections. Many individuals here today will be looking to recruit colleagues for leadership positions in academics, government, and industry. This really is a great opportunity for all of you to get to know each other, and was one of the main reasons why we wanted to get people together. Before turning the stage over to our panelists, I would like to take a few moments to thank the members of the Symposium Committee who provided much of the guidance and direction regarding the scope of the symposium and the research that will be presented. Those members are Panos Haro-Lam-Bidiz, Justine Johnson, Bill LaCourse, Lassa Lindahl, Nagaraj Nirchal, Charles Nicholas, Sue Rosenberg, Andy Sears, and Kathy Sutphin. And now I'd like to introduce the convener of the first panel, Dr. Janet Rutledge, Senior Associate Dean of UMBC's Graduate School. Janet?
And it is my pleasure to convene the first panel of our symposium. I have a few housekeeping things that I'm supposed to ask. First of all, is to remind everyone to either turn off your cell phones or put them on vibrate. Not too many years ago, this wouldn't be an issue, but now we know that often happens. And our panelists, too. Give presentations, and then the audience will have opportunities to ask questions. There are microphones that are scattered throughout the room, and when it is time to ask questions, I just ask you to line up behind one of the microphones and you'll be taken in turn. Now it is my pleasure to introduce to you the moderator of our panel, Dr. Willie Pearson, Jr. He is a professor in the School of History, Technology, and Society at the Georgia Institute of Technology, my alma mater. And in 1999, Dr. Pearson was selected as a giant in science by the Quality Education for Minorities in Mathematics, Science, and Engineering, that's the QEM network. Most of his research has focused on the career patterns of Ph.D. scientists, particularly African Americans, and human resource issues in science and engineering. I'll turn the panel now over to Dr. Pearson.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. All right, that's a whole lot better than on behalf of Freeman and others. I'd like to be the third person to at least welcome you here. It's been a long time for many of us who were there at the very beginning. This particular panel is going to deal with issues about a diverse science and engineering workforce. So I'll just have a few comments, and then I will turn it over to the panelists. Each will introduce themselves and then speak for about 5 or so minutes, and then we will continue that process to the end and then open up things for questions.
Dr. Pearson, if I could just say to the group, it's because of Dr. Pearson that from the beginning we determined to work on evaluation at every step. So would you give him a hand for that, please?
I guess since Freeman opened that up, he paid me so well. a donut and a cup of coffee driving from D.C. No mileage or anything. I understand he's still frugal. I think by now most of you know the criticality of the science and engineering workforce. It's a fundamental component of innovation in this country, which leads to our very high standard of living in the United States. In order to have that, we have to have a well-trained, globally competitive workforce. The other piece that should be added to that, the workforce has to be diverse. And that is one of the main foci for the federal funded agencies, industry, government, and private citizens. All the major areas of employment sectors, that is, academia, business, industry, self-employment, nonprofits, are seeking to include individuals with diverse background with training in science, technology, and engineering. I want to emphasize for this particular panel, we're dealing with the workforce, and it's important to not have a zero-sum game where that everyone has to go to one sector or the other. So I want to point out very clearly that there are multiple and equally valuable pathways to the scientific and technical workforce. Some individuals decide to go into the biomedical area. There will be some who will have PhDs. There will be some who will have PhDs and MDs. But there's also considerable room for those who will have master's degrees, and indeed some will have bachelor's degrees. So I want to make it very clear that the diversity of degrees are all important in terms of diversifying the scientific and technical workforce. Regardless of sector or regardless of pathway, underrepresented groups, and particularly African Americans, remain underrepresented, whether it's industry, whether it's government, whether it's the private sector. And we should keep it in mind as we hear the voices from the former Meyerhoffs and then some people who have been very close to the Meyerhoff program over the number of years. Now I'll turn it over to our first panelist.
Sure, why not? Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Phillip Marshall. I'm a physician now working at Howard University Hospital. I'm a fourth-year psychiatrist. I'm also the vice president, or co-vice president of the house staff, as well as the co-assistant chief president for the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences at Howard University. My comments today were going to be more, I guess, in the the medical side in terms of health disparities, and so how I got to that where I am today, based starting with the Meyerhoff program and moving forward, and some of the research experiences that I have encountered. So to begin with, I'm an M4. That's the 4th class of the Meyerhoff. I graduated in '96 with a graduate in biochemistry and molecular biology. And through my years at the Meyerhoff, we had summer research programs that we did. Now, every year I had a different program to try to determine what my interest was and what direction I would be going. And I had presentations with NIH poster sessions where I spoke about laboratory work in terms of research, where I worked with NIA, the National Institutes on Aging, with Dr. Omefe Bugo and Dr. Joseph Rifkind, and we were looking at erythropoietin, just looking at how fragile it was, just looking at something as simple as blood to see what affects the type of stress could have on that can affect the way the blood cells work. And then the ultimate goal was trying to figure out how that would affect humans in terms of stress, in terms of further research and general health. But I didn't like the lab work as much, so I went further and I tried more. The next summer I went abroad to Erasmus University through the University of Maryland at Baltimore, where I did research on testicular cancer and just a survey to determine what the best treatment strategy and probability of improvement in health. And that was an interesting study. I got published in the Cancer Journal in 1999 on that study as the second name. And it was an interesting epidemiologic study, but that wasn't the direction I wanted to continue in. So I further went through, when I went to the University of Maryland School of Medicine for my medical school degree, I worked with Dr. Jane Wells and Dr. Kate Dickerson. And I worked again on, say, cancer, but this time on screening mammography and how the news media reported on healthcare issues, particularly screening mammography and cancer, because it was a top topic at the time. And that research helped me to understand the difficulties of finding information, but then also finding the right question. One of the issues that we have in not having a diverse field, a diversified research field, or in engineering and medical across the board, is that we don't have enough, we don't know what questions to ask sometimes because it may not be relevant to every population. So in order to have the right questions asked, you have to have a diverse population, a diverse input in order to get different answers to find out what is appropriate for everyone involved and not just a specific group or community. So that helped me in that particular research. And then from there, what got me towards psychiatry, getting there, doing my rotations, I was an assistant in a research project where I had a patient who was bipolar, very manic, and all the treatments that were currently being used were not working. And so they decided, well, what is the pathway for the problem, and what medications can inhibit or work in that pathway? And so we tried a different medication that wasn't used, and it worked. And that really sparked my interest. So I went further on towards psychiatry because mental health is a very underrepresented field for minorities, but also highly stigmatized. And so, especially in the African American community. And so the information that we're getting is from studies done on predominantly Caucasian, maybe a few here, or maybe certain small populations, but it doesn't generalize to the population here that we're dealing with. And if what's important for health disparities and for proper health care, we have to have a better understanding of everyone's health. And that's including all minorities. And so the people who are asking the questions weren't looking like us. It's very important, if we're going to have the right questions, the right health care, the right treatments, that we actually ask the right questions that pertain to all of us. And so that's one of the reasons we need a more diverse field, in my opinion and my belief. Okay. Okay. So my time is being short, but those are the basis of my my comments. Any further questions I can answer later, but thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Brian Wayman. I am a M6, and I got my Bachelor's of Science in Mechanical Engineering here at UMBC, and went on to get my Ph.D. in Mechanical Engineering from Georgia Tech. And I did cardiovascular biomechanics research there. Currently I work with Becton Dickinson. It's a medical device company primarily known for the work in syringes and needle technology, and I work in a group where we develop syringes for developing countries, where we have the syringes have a reuse prevention feature in them, so once they're used once to deliver the medication, they automatically disable and can't be reused by healthcare workers or possible downstream users. So I'm actually here on the panel today filling in for the Vice President of Research and Development of our company, who was originally supposed to be a panelist. So his name is Dr. Ramin Majda. He actually got sick, unfortunately, today, and so he gave us a call on our way here. And so I'm just here to express his desires. He really wanted to come and share his vision for the organization. I think he would have had a lot to offer because he's relatively new to the organization. He came in about 5 years ago, but he had a vision of changing the way our research and development organization looks from a diversity perspective across race, gender, ethnic groups. And so I think it would have been a good opportunity for him to come and share his vision, but I agreed, welcome the opportunity to sit on the panel to offer my insights and my perspectives as an engineer in the workplace as well. So I look forward to answering any questions, in the question and answer segment.
Good afternoon. My name is Nika Wayman. I also graduated in mechanical engineering, got a PhD in mechanical engineering. My research particularly was looking at cell adhesion and the molecules that mediate the adhesion between white blood cells and your blood vessel wall. I think that when you talk about diversifying the workforce in science and engineering, that you have to reflect on the Meyerhoff program, and you need to increase the pipeline in order to increase the workforce. And so to me, the Meyerhoff program, one of the main things it meant to me was giving me exposure to things that I didn't know about. And I think that's important if we're to try and increase diversity in science and engineering. Before the Meyerhoff program, I didn't even know that you could get a PhD in engineering. I knew about a bachelor's, you knew some people had masters, but a PhD wasn't something I knew much about until being introduced to the Meyerhoff program. And through the program, learning more about the PhD, as well as being exposed to other things such as NSF and NIH, as you were speaking of. But that exposure is so important, and I think the Meyerhoff program has really been valuable in instituting that for minorities. So from there, and because of the opportunities that I was exposed to, it's continued to help me in my career. As Brian, I work at BD as well as an engineer, and I work in developing needles and technologies, particularly in anesthesia, also looking at products, advanced products. I think that's important to kind of bridge the gap between academia and industry so that we could really use the innovative research being done in academia to help impact positively the healthcare of our country and globally. So at BD, I feel like I'm getting that experience, being able to learn the side of product development and how innovation happens on the industry side. Another thing that I've been able to do is, again, work with Dr. Mojda, who wasn't able to be here, and trying to increase diversity at BD. It is something that he's interested in doing. And I think as a company, you have to have your senior managers that are committed to the goal of trying to increase diversity. I do see that commitment from him, and he's beginning to try and change the face of R&D there, which has been exemplified by hiring Brian and I. And there's still a long way to go, but there's definitely strategies that are in place, and so hopefully it'll be just the beginning of seeing more minorities in R&D at BD. and helping to achieve that goal. So.
Good afternoon. Is it on? Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Siobhan Laird. I graduated from UMBC with a bachelor's in biological sciences. I attained an MPH, a master's in public health, from Tulane University in New Orleans, and just recently earned a doctoral degree from Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. My focus and my research focus has been in patient-provider communication, looking at disparities or inequalities in health and healthcare between ethnic minorities and the underserved in general and white patients. I wanted to talk a little bit about the interpersonal side of the Meyerhoff program and how that's benefited me over the years. From selection weekend, my experience with the Meyerhoff program has been an inspiring and supportive one. I was surrounded by 70 high-achieving minority students who opened my eyes to the reality that I was not the only one trying to achieve in the sciences. The Summer Bridge program helped me make a smoother transition into undergraduate life, things like living away from home, adjusting to dining hall food, having a roommate, and by the way, Anika was my roommate. So those things, they seem like small things, but they add up to a lot of stressors, and they can detract from your academic achievements. So the Summer Bridge program was really helpful for me. The Meyerhoff staff were also very supportive of me in my time here, and I'm forever indebted to them. They taught me values that helped me not only to achieve in biological sciences here at UMBC, which really wasn't easy, but also they helped me, the lessons that they taught me helped me further in my career. They taught me that I can learn from helping fellow students, and that my success didn't depend on someone else's failure. They taught me, they helped me to develop my work ethic and my sense of discipline, which they may say took me a while to grasp. But by the time I graduated, I think that I really was able to master some of the techniques that they taught me. As I said, the biological sciences program here really wasn't easy. There were a lot of weekend lab days. There were a lot of late night study sessions. But the Meyerhoff program helped me to balance my academic and social life. They had a lot of excursions that had nothing to do with science, which again, did help me in the long run. There also was a lot of, they taught me to be proactive about my academic career, to kind of take charge of it, to decide what my short and long-term goals were gonna be and how I could reach them, to make a realistic plan in reaching them. They also took me to places that I'd never been, like NIH, the National Institutes of Health, to see science labs, to medical schools, to see exactly what medical students did, because at the time I was pre-med. They helped me when I decided that I wasn't going to be pre-med anymore, to decide what it was that I did want to do. They always helped use their connections to get internships for me, to get me lab placements here on campus, which helped me to further narrow down the focus of my future academic career. And they taught me to speak in front of a crowd like I'm doing now, which I never would have been able to do when I was a freshman, because I was just painfully shy. They taught me to introduce myself in 30 seconds flat, including achievements and all kinds of background information. And in general, the Meyerhoff staff believed in me, and they were like proud parents, encouraging me to set high goals for myself and to achieve the goals that I set. So I just wanted to say that in order to diversify the workplace, the scientific workplace in the future, again, you're going to have to tap into the pipeline of minority students who are studying the sciences. It's important to give them the social support, the guidance that they need, as well as the academic support. Because a lot of us don't have parents who had PhDs or even master's degrees to help us to teach us from high school what we need to do to get into graduate school in the future. So the Meyerhoff program was able to provide a lot of that for me, where my parents couldn't, not because they didn't want to, because they didn't have the tools. So the Meyerhoff program gave me a lot of the tools that I needed to succeed in the future, and for that I am appreciative. Thank you.
Hello? Hello? Hi, I'm Lance Hester. I'm an M1, one of the truly, truly old heads. Just to give a little background on myself, excuse me, I got my BS in electrical engineering from the University of Maryland, College Park. Then I headed west, more appropriately Midwest, to Northwestern University, where I got my master's and PhD, respectively, both in electrical engineering and a certificate in telecommunication policy. From there, I've actually been at Motorola Research Labs in Plantation, Florida, which is appropriately Fort Lauderdale, where I do research in wireless communications and wireless sensor networks. And also, I'm an adjunct professor at Florida International University in Miami, which is right outside of Miami proper. And more recently, I've actually kind of thrown my hat into the entrepreneurial round. I'm a co-founder and co-owner of a clothing company for kids, which is really kind of a cool endeavor. So don't know how you mix the two, but anyhow. An interesting thing about us Northwestern folks, and there's a couple of us sitting here, is we're really big on lists. Whenever we talk, we tend to think of things in step 1, you got to do this. Step 2 is this, or A, this doesn't work. B, you shouldn't have done it. Or C, yada, yada, yada. So if you can indulge me a little bit, I'm going to talk about how I've been able to navigate the diverse workforce through basically the concept of exposure. And so I'm going to give you a couple of points, or 3 points more precisely. And my first point is, sometimes things are blessings, but they sure can come in disguises. And to start that talk off, I'm going to give you a little personal account of my own. Like a couple of you out there, I was a military brat or an Army brat. And so we moved around a lot. I remember going from California to Texas to Maryland to Colorado to New York, all over the place. And as a kid, you really think this is not so fun. Because each year you start off with a new set of friends, and then next year you have to build this new set of friends. So it's not really that much fun. But as I got older, I began to see how that curse was really more of a blessing, because you really get to navigate how to work with other people, how to kind of go from that East Coast mindset to the sort of California flip-flop, laid-back attitude, or the more calm, slow-paced Southern hospitality. And I guess the final point that I want to bring home is you really have, we all work with technology a lot, but at the end of the day, we're going to have to interface with people. So learning how to work and not take for granted all of those aspects is really good. So point number 2, following once again the Northwestern rule. Greed is good, or more appropriately, as Gordon Gekko says, greed really works. I remember a while back for the M1 selection weekend, we were in a room kind of like this. And I met all these really stellar individuals. These guys, they were all going to powerhouse institutions of learning like MIT or Stanford, Caltech, all those kind of things. And myself, I hadn't really considered staying in Maryland. And I think if a lot of the M1s who are here will tell you, we just weren't really on that staying in Maryland train. You know what I'm talking about. And oddly enough, our parents were kind of there too, because you could kind of see it when they talk. They're like, not my baby. My baby's going to Harvard. They were going to sport the Cornell mom or the Stanford dad T-shirts, as we used to say back in the day, with the strength. They were going to really just come out with that. And I remember my dad sitting there telling me, it's like, what does this Maryland school really have to offer you? And at the beginning of the weekend, we were just kind of at that point. But toward the middle part and eventually toward the end, Doc and a lot of the UMBC faculty and support staff had done a really good job of expounding all the academics and all the social and cultural benefits that we were going to get from the program. And so you kind of saw the minds turning a little bit. You know, the parents were kind of, they were there. But it wasn't really until Doc broke down the slide rule economics that he really had our parents. I mean, he really said, hey, this is how this is going to work. Your kids are going to have so much money paid for school and everything else like that. And at the time, all you could see were the little dollar signs in their eyes. And I remember my dad saying to me, boy, you better think about this UMBC. So all that aside, it really worked out well. Beyond the monetary aspects, we learned a lot. We got to meet people, CEOs of companies, presidents of universities, things that you would normally not have been able to do. And we had mentors, people who looked like us and did things that we were aspiring to do. And so that went far beyond the monetary things. Not to mention getting out of school and not having $30,000 or $40,000 worth of debt was great. So my last and final point is really, it's actually escaping me right now. My last and final point is that sometimes if you sweat the small stuff, you'll have an opportunity to sweat the big stuff. And this was my experience at Northwestern. I had 3 advisors at the time, and you say, wow, 3 advisors? Man, can this guy pick them? What happened, happened, life happens, and God bless them, they are where they are in life. But anyhow, on the 3rd go-around, I was looking for a thesis topic, and so I really got into this area of wireless communications. Unfortunately, the only advisor available just was booked up. He didn't have any funding. He wasn't looking for any new graduate students, but I really liked wireless networking and communications. So as I would go about trying to, solicit to become the new grad student of some of these other advisors, I still researched the topic of wireless communications on my own. I became very familiar with all these crazy little facts and figures about wireless networking, the researchers, what they did, and everything else. And it just so happened that one advisor had an opportunity from Motorola to send 2 students for an internship and receive this funding. And unfortunately for him, he did not have 2 graduate students researching this area. He only had 1. But I was able to step in. So long story short, I got the internship, I did the research, I got to do bigger things, and here I am working for Motorola today. So a lot of people think, wow, you're really lucky. But I tend to think a little bit more like what Oprah says, that it's more preparation meeting opportunity than luck, because I sweated the small stuff and I got to work on the big stuff. So that's really the size of my talk, and I hope that you learned a little something, if not laughed a little bit. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Darrell Chubin, comes from the American Association for the Advancement of Science. I am not an alum. I like to think of myself as an honorary alum of this program, with the President's approval. I am working on my 3rd career. My first was academic, my second was federal, and my 3rd is now nonprofit. And it was during my 2nd career that I had the privilege of encountering this fledgling program. I guess my role back then was that of host, off-campus host, dating to the inaugural cohort. So I know there are a couple of others from that cohort here. I'd love to reconnect afterwards. I was working at the Congressional Office of Technology Assessment, and the interest on the part of the program was to provide a sense of what one could do with a science or engineering degree in the federal government. So what I did was assemble about a dozen of my colleagues, all scientists and engineers, around a big conference table to talk about what it meant to do policy analysis for the U.S. Congress. The Meyerhoff students, to say the least, were intrigued and a bit puzzled. Why would anyone want to work for the U.S. Congress? a question we asked ourselves daily. But what is probably not known to the students who joined us that day was that the experience was far more transformative for the OTA staff than it was for the Meyerhoff students. The staff at OTA at that time was almost entirely non-minority. They had never interacted with a cadre of students of color before who were interested in science and engineering. And then, of course, they had to answer some very tough questions about why should I even consider doing this. It was a very important, I thought, encounter, and it demonstrated it even back then, critical mass mattered. Now let's fast forward and put Meyerhoff into a little bit of perspective, looking back on 20 years. Meyerhoff, of course, has been a signature program for UMBC. We should not forget that it has also become a model program for the nation, and there will be other panels that will pursue that. We should recognize that many studies now have shown that undergraduate research experiences are vital as a retention tool for students who are going to pursue science or engineering as a career. Meyerhoff, to my mind, was one of the first programs by design, by implementation, and by documentation. In other words, this was not fortuitous. It was not a mistake. It was not just happenstance. It was designed into the program, was able to demonstrate the importance of community among a set of undergraduate students. Not just any research experience, but a caring research experience, which involved peers and faculty and staff monitoring and enveloping the whole student, something that we need to do a lot more of. Part of that experience, of course, was summer internships, which, as far as I'm concerned, is probably the best way of illuminating pathways from school to work, because it previews the workplace, it informs choices, and perhaps most of all, it clarifies for the student his or her talents and interests. You can find out quite quickly that you may not like to do research. It's good to find that out while you're still an undergraduate. And for the employer, interns represent existence proofs that there are smart students that come in all sorts of packages and may look very different from them, who can really add value to the company or to the agency or to the organization. So what we know now, of course, is that a baccalaureate in science or a baccalaureate in engineering with a lot of science content is a sound foundation for a variety of advanced degrees and careers. That what one gets, of course, is habits of mind that respect evidence and identifies one's values in the process. And the mistake that the science community makes is that they think about science degrees only in terms of PhDs, doing research, and in universities. And we know a lot better than that, as we have already heard. We have enormous possibilities for science-trained professionals in journalism, in law, in policy, and in higher ed and industrial administration. The reason I like the non-PhD part of this is because it's actually driven by demand. It's not driven by supply. It's driven by what the workforce needs, and the domestic workforce of the United States consists of only a little over 5% STEM-educated people. The opportunities, in other words, are, I think, boundless. And it is for that reason, given what Dr. Pearson said at the beginning about the very modest gains we've made over the time that Meyerhoff has existed in producing new scientists and engineers of color, that more institutions of higher education have not tried to adapt the UMBC Meyerhoff model. Every 6 weeks I call Dr. Rabosky up and I say, how many people have called you now to ask you about this program? What is it going to take? Even though we'll hear about some of the programs that have been adapted on other campuses, we are far from going to scale. So my closing thoughts are these. Industry gets it. Government gets it. You can't sell to a pluralistic consumer base if your workforce doesn't look like the rest of the world. And business talks about the business case for diversity all of the time. I want to hear universities start talking about the academic case for diversity. And if I am permitted one other very personal comment, very quick, I've been ignoring the red sign. I want to thank by name 5 people. Dr. Pearson, who connected me with Dr. Rabosky 20 years ago. To Dr. Ken Manton, who has meticulously evaluated the progress and outcomes of these students. Dr. Summers and Dr. Baker, who continue to deliver this message and make the case that the right persons and the right program can make a difference. So thank you to all of you for allowing me to participate today.
I think what you've been able to see from the overview that the bosses spoke to those. But let me just say a couple final things. One of the things that we've seen from the very beginning, the Meyerhoff program was well designed, has become a model, but it's not just a model for underrepresented minorities. I want to make that very clear, that even from the beginning, Freeman Rabosky was very inclusive. He has included from the start people of all ethnic backgrounds, all racial backgrounds. The mentors were very diverse. The instructors were very diverse. The individuals that he touched for funding and who supported this program early on is a community that's like what it should be. It represented America. And so one thing I hope you leave from this is that while the Meyerhoff program may have started off being a program that focused primarily on minorities, it has become a program that's designed to increase the participation, and it's a model for what we should be doing in science education and training in this country. And Freeman deserves a lot of credit for that, along with the staff. And that staff included some people who are old-timers here, like Todd Woolston. And so I hope you don't forget. Stop, would you just stand one moment, because I don't want this to pass where people forget who was there. With that being said, we are now open for questions, and I think our timekeeper will keep us on spot. Any questions from the floor?
Gail Slaughter from Baylor College of Medicine, and we've worked with a number of Meyerhoff scholars at several levels. My question for the panelists is, what's your advice to these young people who are now, some of them moving out of academic training, others will be thinking about doing that, moving into the workplace? What are the differences in attitudes or skills they need to bring as they move into the workplace that might augment what they're already doing in an academic environment?
So I'll speak on that in terms of moving from academic workplace to industry. The 2 biggest adjustments for me, I think, were working closely in a team and having a boss kind of looking over your shoulder. Because in academia, you have more of a freedom to do your work. it's more of independent working, particularly for my project. It really depends lab to lab. But I had a very individual project that I worked by myself and got things done. My advisor was more hands-off. You know, we'd meet every so often. If I had a question, I could go to him, but he wasn't really, you know, working closely with me, let's say, and getting things done. Whereas when I moved to industry, it's very much team-oriented. Even the way it's set up, you know, people can just float over to check on what you're doing real quick, and I'm used to having it all laid out, having all my data analyzed, having it more in presentation format, and then I tell you what I have. So more informal discussions about what you're doing, and you know, like I said, your manager wanting to meet more often. So I think for me, those were probably the two biggest adjustments that I had to make.
The other thing I would want to add is be able to put your research into context, keep up with, I guess I would say, the media, the news, journals, so that you know where your research fits into the bigger picture of what's going on in the world, and be able to speak to that.
To piggyback on two colleagues, it's very important to remember what you've learned in your academic setting in terms of your presentation, how you carry yourself, how you present yourself, and what you know, as they were saying, be up on top of your game and on top of your field. Because what happens when you're in a public sector is that you don't have as much safety. And what I mean by that is, in the academic sector, you are being coddled, you're in a sense being taught how to be able to work in the public sector, so that everything you're learning here is important. And it will carry you through all of your interactions, and it'll set you above the rest when you follow what you've learned here in the Meyerhoff.
I think the thing that stands out to me is the factors that drive success in academia versus industry. In academia, the research pursuits are all about gaining or creating new knowledge and intellectual discoveries. And so when you approach your research, you know, you're thinking, you know, big picture. You keep wanting to answer more and more questions. You know, like everything you find leads to another question, and it's this intellectual utopia. In industry, every quarter you have to report earnings. And so really, you know, the finances drive the business. So even like for me, I work in the medical device industry, and I'm interested in helping people with learning technology, but at the end of the day, we have to deliver a product. In academia, you deliver papers and publications, but we have to keep delivering products in industry. And so you have to keep that context in mind. I mean, everything is, at least in my experience, in industry, you know, it's very focused, it's very fast-paced. We have to deliver at the end of the day. And so I think that for me, and I think in industry, there are certain sectors where you have like these research components of different organizations, but for the most part, like R&D, you have to deliver products at the end of the day. And I think it just affects the way you approach your work every day when you come.
I would say 2 points. The first one is be flexible. Academia teaches you how to research and break down problems, but when you're working in a corporate setting or an R&D sort of lab, you may not get to work on the project that is your strength, but you know how to do research, and you've been taught to be an intelligent thinker, so be flexible and learn to adapt. The second one, which is going to be sort of odd, the second point is be sociable. And you're going to say, what? But oftentimes you'll find new research innovations and just talking to somebody about a problem that's not remotely related to what your problem is. And at the same time, they get to learn a little more about you, so that kind of hinges on what one of the other panelists had say about communication. Being able to deliver your research, it doesn't happen in a vacuum, and people aren't going to know your research or know what you're doing unless you cheer it on. You're your biggest cheerleader, so I'd say those are the 2 biggest points.
Question? Got a question. Is the mic on here? Everybody hear me? Yes. Yeah. All right, before I start, I'm giving the points to my man Phil. We used to run track together, so. But I would like to play the part of Doc and all the rest of this crew and just say how proud I am of all of you and what you have done. I mean, just to hear you. I graduated, I'm in M3, and yeah, right on, right? I graduated with my bachelor's and master's in mathematics from here, and I teach now at the Community College of Baltimore County. But to hear how far you have gone and what you have done, I am impressed, and it really does my heart good to actually hear all the work that you've done. I know that many of us here are doing the same, and so I'm really, really happy to be here. But a part of that, I think, is along the lines of some of the things you've already said. When you're actually in school, I have a question in here, but when you're actually in school, we do have a lot of people that are here and supporting us and believing in us, even when you don't believe in yourself. It takes a while for us to get to that point where we feel like we really can do this, but even then, as Lance said, sometimes you don't want to touch things that have nothing to do with what you are doing, but it's beneficial to keep your mind open and go ahead and experiment and test some other areas and see what happens, because you'll find interesting connections between what you are studying and what someone else is studying. And that, I think, is how innovation actually comes about. And so I encourage everybody to continue with that. But along the lines of my question here, I actually had a great experience with my mentor, who actually is still a good friend of mine and is the godfather of my daughter. And I actually wanted to ask, how are we continuing with the mentor type of a program, and has it been effective? If you guys can share some of your experiences. I know that I actually ended up with two. My first mentor didn't quite feel it so well and didn't quite work with it because he either didn't have the time or whatever. But then I actually worked with my new mentor, Dr. Rodney Wallace, at AT&T, and it's been great since then. And I think that actually was a part of that cheerleading aspect of it. No matter how crazy I think I feel about being able to do certain things, he has always been there to say, you can do anything you want. You know, you are so much smarter than I was when I was there, and you know, you're doing things that I couldn't even imagine doing. And I just want to ask you guys to share a little bit about that, and maybe those of you who are in the industry, what kind of programs do you actually have to reach back and really spend that time with some of us as we're going through our experiences.
All right. I can start with a bit on the mentors. I was
right
speaking
on,
a bit of, yeah, thanks. When I was my talk, I was speaking about the different mentors I went through trying to discover what type of field to go in for myself, and landed into psychiatry. So the mentors are extremely important. I have actually spoken with a few of them from before, but sometimes it does, you lose track. But you never forget, and you always call and thank those who've come before you, who helped you along your way. Currently, everywhere you go, you have to pick up someone new, and you got to also give back. This last week or so, 2 weeks ago, I went back to an AME church and spoke to a career day for students to encourage them to go forward in research in terms of in this type of career. But also, for my own mentorship, my chairman of my department and the chairman of the research are actually encouraging us to continue research. And I have a current paper that might be coming out, and I don't know when it's coming out, but it's a letter to the editor for a case report that I've been writing up. And so it's important to continually accept mentorship, but also to give back. And so in that respect, I was saying, my previous mentors led me to the direction I'm in, and then I have current mentors now who are helping me continue along that direction. And then also, I'm going back to come back here, and I've gone back to some churches and to speak with students or those who are still trying to figure out where they're trying to go. So I think it's very important, and I thank you for your comments and the question.
Oh, I was going to say that the mentoring aspect of the program I think was really important because, first of all, I didn't realize I needed a mentor until I got one. And as I've moved forward, I too have sought out mentors as my career moves on, and as I reach to the levels that my mentors have helped me to reach, then I reach for higher mentors. And then I too have given back to the program in any way that I can, and I usually try to find ways to hire Meyerhoff students or get them hired whenever I hear of an opening, whenever I need help from, you know, an undergraduate student, I always seek out Meyerhoff students first because to whom much is given, much is expected, as was told to me many times. You know, they repeat it over and over again, and you kind of get bored with it when you're here. But then when you move on, you realize how important it is. So I definitely think that having a mentor through the program has helped me to become a better mentor, and has taught me how to work with mentors, because a lot of times they're busy and it's hard to get in contact with them or how to keep in touch with them. And so I was taught techniques to kind of keep in contact with my mentor over the years.
Yeah, just quickly. When I left the university 20-some years ago, I was intent on continuing to mentor. And because of programs like Meyerhoff, I had the opportunity to get student interns at OTA and then at NSF, and have continued to teach as an adjunct at Cornell in Washington, where I spend my time with third-year undergraduates once a year trying to talk half of them out of going to law school. Because part of this is simply reminding them that they have a full range of skills, and if they're good enough to go to law school, they're good enough to go to graduate school, and that they shouldn't foreclose possibilities. The other thing that I've learned being of this age is that no matter how much you publish, your biggest legacy is going to be the people you touch. And so no matter how old you are, you can do this, and you can do this well.
Hello. Hello? Okay. My name is Tiffany Bright. I'm a M11, and my question... Let's do this. Several of you all talked about exposure, and with that data, it kind of reminded me of a recent situation I had talking to some friends in med school and MD PhDs, and here it is in 2008, we were still able to say, oh, well, this year in my program, there were no African Americans, no one who looked like me applying. And it got us thinking, is it possible that we are introducing students to, like, should we think about exposure going to middle school and elementary school to try to get them to think about science and engineering instead of college? I don't know, but we were kind of wondering, is that maybe the opportunity that we're missing?
Well, I guess it depends on what your access and your time is, because when I was in med school, and have you ever heard of the Student National Medical Association? They have a lot of programs where they do just as you spoke. They go back into, it's called the HPREP program, Health Professions Recruitment Enrichment Program. I was a co-chair of that in med school. And you go back to high schools and middle schools, you give presentations, you pick a couple of med students with you, it's basically run by the students. And you try to go back to the high schools and middle schools and do exactly that. Try to encourage them to go further on. And so it is done. And it's another form of mentorship that, sorry, it slipped my mind, but it is something you do. And that is being done. It can be done here as well.
I think what you're talking of, exposures, is very important. And when I think back, you know, we discuss it pretty often looking at graduate school, and it was a tough time. It's a tough time, and I feel like even knowing the savviness, knowing how to navigate through graduate school, that some of my peers may have had an advantage, because as Siobhan said, some of them had parents who were already PhDs. I have a son who's almost 3 years old, and the learning that goes on, even at 2 or 3 years old, just the exposure that they have now, they're absorbing things. So elementary school, I don't think is too early to start exposing them to science and engineering, because it's, you're planting seeds at those ages. And those are things that it may be subtleties that they're gaining, but that's going to help when they get to graduate school and choosing an advisor, choosing a research topic, knowing how to balance research and classes and things like that. Things that, maybe the advice was given to me, but because I wasn't exposed to it and seeing it day to day, it didn't really sink in. And so it may have been more of a challenge for me to navigate those things versus some of my peers. So I definitely think that exposure at all levels is very important, so that at least they know they have opportunities. And as we were speaking before, they can have the confidence to know that if I want to do science and engineering, I can do it. It's not a closed door for me, so.
And I've worked with my high school as well, because I definitely believe that the pipeline starts early. I have friends in my graduate program, because their parents were PhDs, were in the high school, when I was doing jobs at summer camps, they were working in labs, and they were already getting statistical knowledge that I was trying to catch up with, once I reached to undergrad and graduate school. And I think as more of us are gaining PhDs and gaining MDs, we're kind of working more collectively to reach back to the middle schools and high schools. It's just that our numbers have been so low that we haven't been able to congregate the way we might have. But as our numbers increase, we're starting to realize how we can organize to make sure that there is exposure at those younger ages.
Good afternoon, I'm Kelly McCants-Price. I'm an M2, and I have to echo Tyrone McCoy's sentiments. It is incredible for me, because I was here at UMBC when you all were here, and with the exception of Lance, I think everyone came in after I did. So it's wonderful to look up on the panel to see Dr. Phillip Marshall, Dr. Brian Wayman, Dr. Anika Wayman, Dr. Siobhan Laird, and Dr. Lance Hester. And not to slight any of my other Meyerhoff colleagues in the room, all the other doctors. It's an awesome experience. I think coming from the Meyerhoff program, we have the unique experience of being able to look around, coming back to an event like this as alumni and say, I know Dr. So-and-so, or most of the people that I graduated with from this program are now doctors. So it's absolutely awesome. My question is about graduate school. It does not matter what program you go through or you've come through. Graduate school is a very, very difficult experience. I think I heard Anika talk about that a little bit. Given that there are so many current Meyerhoff students in the room, some of whom are probably considering going to graduate school, knowing what you know now on the other side of the graduate experience, what kind of encouragement would you give them? What would you tell them to look out for? What kind of advice would you give them? Maybe 2 or 3 key points that you would give them to prepare them for grad school, to maybe avoid some of the pitfalls that you fell into.
We have about 5 minutes left, so Phil, we'll start with you and just come down.
You all might know this one. Hold fast to your dream. Very important for perseverance, because there will be days when you're tired, you don't want to keep studying, you don't want to work hard, and you're like, I just want to take a break. But that's the time when you hold fast to your dream. That's the importance of that statement. It is throughout your life, you're going to need it and use it. I'll just reserve my comments for brevity's sake and let the rest speak. And if there's more time, then I can say more.
Hold fast the dreams. No, I think look for areas that excite you. You want to go to an institution. Maybe I'll say this as one suggestion because time is limited. Look for institutions that have a research group doing the type of work that you want, not just one advisor that's doing that type of work. Because, things could happen if that one advisor, you go there for one person and his lab is full, you don't have the opportunity. But go to an institution that has a vibrant research area that you're interested in, because at the end of the day, once you get your degree, you'll be evaluated on your production in graduate school, publications, presentations, and things of that nature. So you want to go to a place that's doing good work and producing results.
There's a lot of advice I'd have for you, but for the sake of time, I will summarize it in 2 things. One, to find a mentor, someone who's in graduate school, going through it, and can tell you the ins and outs and then they can tell you everything I would tell you now. And then for 2, know what you want to do after graduate school. Know what your career, the career that you want to pursue, so that when times get hard, you know the end goal and you know that graduate school is for a reason, and that will keep you motivated.
I have 3 quick advice pieces to give you. 1, seek out a mentor who has, as Anika said, gone through graduate school and gotten the degree that you're getting, but also one who is outside of your school, who can give you unbiased opinions and advice about what you're doing. 2, seek out your colleagues as mentors, your people in your cohort, people in cohorts above and below you even, who can vent with you and understand what you're going through and tell you what their experience is currently. And I just forgot my 3rd piece, so never mind.
Graduate school is your choice to go, so get good at it. Get good at being a grad student. I'd say that one of the biggest things that nobody's talking about is understand the funding situation. Know that you have either external funding from a scholarship or a fellowship, or whether you're going to be a TA or a non-TA, because that will generally, if you get a research assistantship, in other words, your research is funded by your advisor is going to be very, involved in your life. If you have external funding, he or she may not be that involved in your life, because in some aspects you may be a free ride for them. So understand that and be your own advocate. If you have external funding, push just as hard as the students that are under research fellowship to get work and to get time and things like that. Besides all the mentorship and everything else, have a support system. When I was at Northwestern, we had a Black Graduate Students Association where we met with people who weren't in the sciences, and sometimes they saved your sanity, because not every day is going to be a bright, fuzzy, warm day for you, and just kind of commiserating with people helps a whole lot. Trying to think of, there's tons of other things, but yeah, just continually, know what your advisor's research is, and really, be active, be a part of it. The guy that wrote The Pursuit of Happiness said, it's your life, be good at it. I just echo the same thing. It's your graduate student life, be good at it. That's it.
Okay, time is up. I would like to thank the panelists and the audience for participating.